Well, welcome to Knoxville Raceway, everyone, and continuing with our 65th racing season series of videos here that we're doing to celebrate 65 years of weekly racing here. Wanted to interview someone that's a fan that's been coming here for a long time, kind of get their perspective of the history of Knoxville Raceway a little bit and why they love coming here. So this is a good friend of mine, Dan Zimmerman. We both grew up in Newton, and Dan, thanks for doing the interview, and just kind of tell us a little bit about what was your first memories of coming to Knoxville Raceway when you were a kid?
Sure, Eric. So I moved to Newton in 1976, and my grandpa in Wisconsin used to take me to stock car races up there. So I'd go watch Dick Trickle and other guys. So when we moved to Newton, I didn't know where I was going to go to the races anymore. And my next door neighbor happened to be Larry Bovenkamp, and he would come here to the races, and they were kind enough to bring me as a kid so I could see what a sprint car race is. And moving from Wisconsin, I'd never even heard of a sprint car, so I didn't know what I was coming to watch. But I'm like, it's a race, I'll just come and do it, right? So we came down, and first thing I noticed is, wow, these cars are fast. And I'm like, geez, this is pretty cool. And they were big Doug Wolfgang fans, and so I'm watching the races. I'm like, this Doug Wolfgang guy, he's pretty good.
Yep.
And so Doug Wolfgang became my first favorite driver. So now I could actually come and watch the races, and I had somebody to cheer for, and that's when you start getting a little more involved in the races and attached to it. So later that year, another family friend, Dave Humke, was nice enough to give me a ticket to the Nationals. So my first Nationals was 1978, and I didn't really know what I was going to see. I went to a few local races, but then all these guys from all over the United States started coming in, and I'm thinking, whoa, there's a lot of guys that are just as good as Doug Wolfgang. And I remember Jack Hewitt running the Chuck Dalu 78 car, and he was hauling butt around here. And I'm like, man, I don't think Doug Wolfgang's going to win. But fortunately that year he did. Yep. And that kind of cemented Doug Wolfgang as my favorite driver, which I'd have to say even now, 40 years later, I don't think I could ever have a favorite driver more than Doug Wolfgang was for my favorite. So, I would come down. My family wasn't really a racing family, so I'd have to get rides here with other people, and eventually they would come and go to the races here and there too. But I just dreamt of the day I could actually get my driver's license so I could just drive here myself, because that's really, I would say, my whole lifetime, of all the things that have changed, this is the one thing that never has. Yep. So I've been coming now, like I said, 40 years, and you come up, sit in the stands, watch hot laps, and you're like, man, these guys, you cannot believe how fast they go. So the feeling's still there, 40 years later.
For me too. What are some of your favorite historical moments that you've witnessed at the races here?
Well, definitely the 1990 Nationals would be the top of the list. I don't know if we'll ever see one like that again, especially now because, the competition's so tough from the A feature down to the D feature on Saturday night. I just have a hard time seeing somebody like Wolfgang come from the D main and finish fifth in the A, as an example. And then just the drama that happened during the feature with Kinzer blowing up and Mark Kinzer leading the race and blowing his engine, and the finish between Sammy Swindell and Bobby Allen at the end. So that would definitely be the top of the list as far as the racing goes. Yep. Now, as far as the other things go, there's just probably too many to count, just and we'll probably touch on that a little bit in the camping segment, but, we just had so many good times down here. It's just crazy.
the camaraderie with friends and family, I feel like, is one of the big things that keeps a lot of race fans coming back. And me and this guy have drank a few beers in our day in Section D, row 15, seats one through five for a long time. So we've got some stories that we're probably not qualified to be for this kind of a video, but just talk about the friendships you've made. A lot of the people that we see here on a weekly basis and yearly basis at the Nationals are basically family to us.
Yeah, and that's really true, not just at the Nationals, but even today in the North Campground. We're kind of like our own little community up there. So I've been a seasoned camper now for 18 years and camped at the Nationals for 30. So I feel like we had like our core group of friends, but it's just kind of crazy how over time that's evolved and changed. And now, you know, we take a look at our group photos. You got people there from Colorado, Australia, Nebraska, South Dakota, all over the place. And, you know, these people now with social media, you can easily stay in touch with like you couldn't do before. So it's a lot easier for us to just keep in touch with each other during the year when we're living, in some cases, halfway around the world from each other. So that's the cool part. And, you know, there have been people that have came and went, you know, that would come, and that's just kind of part of life in general anyway. But, you know, that's just, once you've done this for a long time, you know, you realize really anymore it's more even about the people than the racing. Yep. And that's where I have the most enjoyment from this.
By the way, hi to Matt and Wendy and Jay Stock in Australia and Jason Cogan. Yep. There's a few other people Matt's dad. So David, yeah. What year did we meet those guys?
So here's a little camping story for you.
Story time with Dan.
Yeah. So back in the 80s and the first half of the 90s, we used to camp behind turn 3 and 4. Yep. And those days were probably the best days of camping I can think of, just because we're right there on the grounds, and we really had an awesome core group of guys, and it was just the guys that would go camp for the whole weekend, and, you know, we really had a good time. I'll just leave it at that. But we're having a little party after the races one night in '92, and this guy comes stumbling up to the bus where we're camping, and he kind of talked funny, and we're like, "Where are you from?" And he says, "Australia." I'm like, "Oh, cool. Like, did you come here with other people?" And he's like, "No, I just came here by myself. And this is my first time here." And I'm like, "Wow, that's pretty crazy." So his name is Jason Cogan, and he hung out with us the rest of the weekend and had such a good time that he came back the next year and brought his mate Matt Stock with him. And Matt, he had a blast, and they're both really super hardcore sprint car guys. And Matt works on a team in Australia too, Bruce Stevens Racing. So, you know, just things like that. Like, where else in Iowa would you just, for happenstance, meet somebody from halfway around the world? And they all share the same passion you do. Like, you know, sprint car racing to me is all about passion. People do this because they love it, whether they're a fan, a crewman, a track worker, you know, someone like you that does all the media stuff and the other work for the track. You do it because you love it, and that's really what this is all about.
I'm definitely not doing it for the money, people. So, well, Z, thanks for taking some time with me today, reliving some memories. 65 years is a long time for weekly racing. The track's been around a lot longer than that, back in the early 1800s, but weekly racing program has only been here for a 65-year period with sanctioned racing. So, anyway, wanted to get a fan perspective, and couldn't think of a better guy to do it than with my buddy Dan here. So thanks for taking the time, and look forward to the rest of the series. Thanks.